you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion for the sake of the world. This delusion has gotta go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. It is January 31st, 2010. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Don Baker. Welcome.
Hey, good to be here.
We're not quite sure what happened, but we've got miscellaneous camera problems as usual, and we don't even care. We're just going to keep on trucking. So I'm going to get right through the announcements. This is a live public access television program sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization that promotes positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We'll have the number up for you shortly where you can call in. If you do not want to call in today, or you're unable to actually get through because the lines are full, you can email the show, tv@atheist-community.org, which I've changed the order of the announcements, so it's not up there yet, but it will be. tv@atheist-community.org goes myself, the co-host, and some of the people behind the scenes. We get tons of email. We try to answer as much of it as we can, but there's a chance that you won't get a response. In that case, you can attempt to call in on another week's program, or you can stop by the Atheist Community of Austin's website. That's www.atheist-community.org. And there you can find information, a calendar, what we're doing, a list of events that are on the horizon, including the lecture series, which I'll mention in a moment, and a frequently asked questions page where the answers to some of the more frequently asked questions are posted. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. For more information, you can go to the website, www.nonprofitsradio.com. That's PROPHETS. And we were live yesterday. We'll be live again in 2 weeks. It's hosted by Dennis Lubay, features myself, Russell Glasser, and other people on occasion as they show up. This program, as I mentioned, is a live call-in program. We'll have the number up for you shortly. Its primary purpose is to reach out to the atheist community in the Austin area and around the world. Our goals are not necessarily to deconvert somebody or sit here and tell them, exactly why they're wrong, although we're happy to do that. Ideally, we'd like to promote communication, discussion, have people call and tell us what they believe and why, talk about various topics, news stories, whatever's on your mind. And Don will actually be presenting a topic for us to educate people a little bit and hopefully prompt some conversation as well. And all my phone lines just went dead.
Okay.
Just so you guys in the booth know.
We didn't intentionally hang up on you.
In addition to the media outreach programs like the Atheist Experience and the Nonprofits, the ACA also hosts a number of other events, including an Atheist Happy Hour at the Dog and Duck Pub every Thursday, beginning around 7 o'clock. And we have brunch at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road every Sunday, beginning at around 11:30, except for the first Sunday of the month, when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center, located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. The next lecture will be February 7th, 2010, and it'll be Dr. Jennifer Whitson giving a presentation about seeing patterns in everyday life. I've heard nothing but good things about this. I'm looking forward to going. And if you're interested in coming, you can drop by the website for more information, and you can be down there at the Austin History Center at 12:15 on the 7th. All of our events are open to the public. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person who'd like to attend is welcome to. If you're coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, please don't. We're not interested in having our free time and our education time and our dinner times disrupted by people who just want to come down and
grandstand.
Yeah, I have a keen interest in what people actually believe, more of an interest in why they believe it, and I think there's some of those subjects will come up over the course of the show. But I'm not going to waste a whole lot more time on announcements, other than to say that the March 14th show, which is a month and a half out, is going to have a guest, and some people already know who that guest is. I'm not going to go into it right now, but as we get closer, we'll let you know. And after the program's over, as you already saw by the preemptive post there, we get together for dinner at Threadgill's. The show's on until 6 o'clock, and we'll be at dinner around 6:30 or so. That's 301 West Riverside Drive. And come on down and have some dinner and talk. And how are you, Don?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
Haven't seen you in a while.
I have, yeah, well, I haven't seen you.
You were under the weather last time I talked to you?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, well, good.
Peachy keen.
Peachy keen. Well, good.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, today, one of my failings, I guess, is I like to talk about big topics because I think that sometimes people don't notice the biggest things going on. And atheists often focus on intellectual arguments against theism. They focus on, reason and these sorts of things. And another argument is possible. We can talk about moral arguments against theism. And in fact, I think that one of the strongest arguments is the strongest argument you can make against a particular religious belief is a moral argument. And this, pretty much everything I'll say today applies to Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, the three Abrahamic religions. Even though most of my examples will focus on Christianity, you can adapt this argument very easily for these other religions. So the question is, who is responsible for the systematic moral failures of Christianity? And yes, there are such failures. So either there's a God and he's evil, and this God is orchestrating these systematic moral failures, or there's no God and that Christianity is just a bunch of thugs doing these things because it feels good or it's a politically driven thing or whatever. Perhaps there are other explanations. So if you can come up with an explanation that fits these facts that I'm presenting today, call in and tell us. Correct me if I say anything wrong, or if you have a better explanation for what's going on than I do. So I invite that. I hope we do have a lot of callers. So today I'm going to talk about Christian beliefs as I understand them, which I make mistakes occasionally, so correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to go through a litany of failures and then a litany of rationalizations I hear when I bring up these sorts of failures in arguments. So the Christian beliefs I hear are the Christian beliefs that, as I understand them, are that God is the author of morality. He is the source of where morals come from. God is omnipotent and perfect. God created the universe and humankind, and so he should have no problem at all communicating with humans if he wants to. God wrote and inspired the Bible, and that the Bible gives us moral instructions to believers, like the Ten Commandments and such. Hopefully here nothing's controversial, nothing's surprising. For particular Christians, the Trinitarians,
Fat chance of that.
Fat chance, okay. For particular Christians, the Trinitarians, the God is this three-partite thing, is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, it supposedly dwells within all believers and has something to do with the morality of those believers. So God is manifest in the moral actions of believers. So a lot of people believe that, and he reveals himself in the collective actions of humans. Believers want to please God. They want to go to heaven. They want to make him happy because they don't want to go to hell. And believers can communicate with God with prayer, right? And and believers want to follow God. So this whole free will argument of, bad things happen because there's free will doesn't apply, because believers want to please God and want to follow God's will, as a rule. Not all of them do, of course. Believers interact regularly with God through prayer and worship. So I think all of these things are more or less statements of faith, or more or less things that most Christians would believe in. So I think if we put all these together, though, you have this question of there can be no reason why Christians' collective behavior is anything but a reflection of God's absolute morality. And this is the reason why I personally like to lump, on moral questions, I like to lump Christians together, because, if let's say gay marriage is something that God cares about, and all the Christians go out and do something on gay marriage or abortion rights or whatever the topic is of the day, then I think that's and they win out over other Christians that disagree, then I think that's a reflection of God's will. according to the beliefs of Christians. And if people don't get along, if they can't make up their minds, then that's really that's really an argument against absolute morality, right? There can't be an absolute morality from this perfect God if people disagree on these things. So anyway, so perhaps the best argument against these religions is to look at the behavior of the followers, and I think the behavior of the followers shows their true beliefs. So most Christians know about and tout the persecution of Christians by Romans. In early Christianity, there were some Christians who refused to pay homage to the gods, the Roman gods, and they were persecuted for that. And if you look at it with today's eyes, it's almost like they weren't paying the defense taxes, right? The worship of these gods were the ones that were protecting Rome, and if they weren't given these sacrifices and things, then Rome would lose its protection, or at least that was how the thinking was. And Christians decided, no, we're not going to have anything to do with that. We're not going to worship any other gods. And so there was this persecution against Christians, and we're talking maybe hundreds of people being persecuted. I don't think it's even in the tens of thousands. It's a relatively small number of folks. So Christians know all about this little bit of persecution, but when you look at the Christian history, you see all sorts of persecution that the Christians have done on others. And I just want to list a few of these, some of the big ones, and just make people aware that there's really awful history here. So for example, with the Crusades from 1095 to 1272, the Crusades were against the Muslims primarily, but also the Jews and Cathars and a lot of other little religious groups. One of they were, supposedly out to kill heretics and preserve the faith, these sorts of things. There's a strong religious motivation to the Crusades. They also ended up stealing land and possessions and recapturing the Holy Land and these sorts of things. And the mantra during the Crusades was, kill them all, for the Lord knows who are his. And this is one of the abbots and one of the popes actually adopted this sort of idea that, kill them all, let God sort it out. So the idea was, you want to make absolutely sure you kill the enemy and the heretics, and if you kill some of your own in the process, don't worry about it because, they're in heaven. So that's what happened in the Crusades. We're talking maybe millions of people killed, and in a brutal way. The people who were fighting in the Crusades were offered a remission from sin, which is basically a ticket to heaven. So there's a lot of religious motivation behind this. And a lot of Christians, I think, have forgotten what the Crusades were and what they were all about, and they use this term rather lightly. I think even W thought of the latest war in Iraq as a crusade, and he didn't really realize all the connotations that were there. Let's move on to the Inquisition. Following the Crusades and still persecuting heretics, the Inquisition was basically to go after the remaining people that were maybe not believers or thought to be Jewish or thought to be whatever. And both Protestants and Catholics did this. After the Reformation, the Protestants had Inquisition as well. So people were generally jailed and tortured and given and submitted to try to give forced confessions. Many people were brutally killed. Let's move on to the witch hunts from 1480 to 1700s. Again, this is based on fear and moral panic of this potential people who had magical powers, which of course they didn't. This is all religiously motivated as well. So there's always, there was generally some sort of false accusation based on flimsy evidence that their soul popped out or they saw them with a cat or some stupid thing. And there's an estimate of 40,000 to 100,000 people who were executed based on witch hunts. Martin Luther, the founder of Protestantism, incited the Peasants' War, 1524 to 1525, where 300,000 people were killed. So that's so Protestantism isn't immune to these things either. 5, the conquest of the Americas from 1492 onward. There's a decimation of indigenous populations due to disease and outright killing. Again, a notion of convert or die. A lot of people committed suicide rather than be part of that. There were probably several million Native Americans killed, and there was an attitude among Christianity of blaming the enemy for this, that these people deserved to be killed because they were savages. Coming up into more modern times, we have the Holocaust, which was motivated in part by Christian anti-Semitism that Hitler was steeped in, and Hitler was very fond of Martin Luther's anti-Semitic writings. We have the persecution, murder, and torture of Jews and other ethnic groups. An estimate of 11 to 17 million people have been killed, and this was all supported by the Catholic Church, and they really didn't stand up against it while it was happening. The Hitler was never excommunicated, and he was a Christian, a Catholic, and you can read his writings on that. So the conclusion that I get from these moral failures is the truth beliefs of Christians that is that it's okay to murder, torture, and persecute. And, there's a very dark past in history from Christianity, and I don't think very many Christians are aware of this past. So when I bring up this sort of argument, I get all sorts of rationalizations, I get all sorts of spin and wiggling when I bring this up, and let me go through a few of those because they're kind of amusing. Feel free to call in with your own rationalization for why Christianity has been so systematically evil throughout its history. So as a rule, believers, when I bring this up, feel no responsibility at all for the actions that have gone on in previous Christianity. I mean, they want the benefits of Christianity. They want to go to heaven. They want to get that perpetual orgasm in heaven, but they don't want to have any responsibility, or they don't feel any remorse for the killings that Christianity, the religion, has done in beforehand. So here are some of the rationalizations. One is ignorance. So Christians are generally ignorant of these things. The churches don't teach these dark phases of history. If they do, they try to whitewash them. And the reason that you won't hear about these in churches is that it conflicts with them making money. So a minister, if they teach you about these things, they're going to make less money. They're basically a parasite on society, and if you don't go and tithe, they're not going to make any money. So they have no interest in letting you know that. Your ignorance is what's important. I hear denial and spin. So there's active movements to say how these terrible things that Christianity has done are not so bad. For example, the Catholic Church is trying to spin the Inquisition as not being as bad as thought. For the Holocaust, there's this notion of, we're a Judeo-Christian nation and the Jews are our little buddies, and this belies the whole 1,500-year history of Christianity persecuting Jews. If you believe that the Jews and Christians are buddies, then you really are pretty ignorant of the history of your religion. There's a spin about slavery not being so bad, and other pro-Christian propaganda campaigns. For example, in our textbooks here in Texas, we have a movement. We have this guy David Barton trying to put positive spin on Christianity. Well, the negative facts about Christianity have already been removed from these textbooks. So he's there to put icing on the cake and put positive spin. Another rationalization I hear is, well, that's a different brand of Christianity than the one I practice. That my Christianity is different than Catholicism or whatever. But the problem with this is that there's 2,000 sects of Christianity, and none of them seem to have the ability to get their story straight. If there's a single God, then you should be able to pray to that God. You should be able to read Mark 11:24, where Jesus promises, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." And there's also quotes in Matthew and John that say much the same thing. If you want to ask God for whatever, it seems like a trivial thing to ask what whether or not gays should be married or whatever. And so the Episcopalians, all they have to do is ask God, and they won't have to have this schism in their church. And so there shouldn't be 2,000 branches of Christianity. So all of this is really sort of not the atheist problem, it's your problem. If you can't get your story straight, then why should anybody take you seriously? And even if you claim that your little branch of Christianity is so much better, can you point to the day on which you took the lies from the previous branch of Christianity where you came from, added a few more lies, and ended up with the truth? Can you point to the day when that happened? And I don't know, I think I've ever had anybody answer that question. So, let me know how you're getting at the right answer by building on the crap that came before you. I also hear rationalizations about the actions of individuals. Well, these are just individuals that did whatever they're on their own, and it's not a reflection of Christianity, and there's no connection. Well, this is not true. Ironically, or this is not true because very often or in all of these examples, they were religiously motivated. They were led by people who did it for religious reasons, and this is a reflection of your religion. And if you're going to use this sort of argument, there's a sad irony here where there were so many Jews killed systematically because Jews as a whole supposedly killed Jesus. So in effect, your religion has done just this very thing of lumping people together in order to persecute them as a group, whereas you're not willing to take responsibility as a group for the persecution that you've done. So there's a huge double standard here. Also, this notion of substitutive sacrifice is a central tenet of Christianity, that that Jesus is going to die for your sins. So, well, why shouldn't you bear some responsibility for the beliefs that you have that match the people that came before you? And if it's all individuals acting on their own, then there's no notion of absolute morality. So own up to it. Answer that, whether there is an absolute morality or not. So, in my opinion, this is just an excuse to kill with impunity. Another rationalization I hear is projection. Well, people will say, turn the spotlight around and say, well, atheists can't be moral. They say that atheists can't do this. Well, we're just human beings, and we don't have a God to follow, and we're trying to get better answers as we go too. And I think we're doing a better job than Christianity. So, what good is your God if you're ascribing to be as good as atheists? There's another fallacy where people say, well, I can find some subsect of Christianity that did the opposite of the thing you're pointing out, that they spoke out against war, they weren't killing. And so what you're doing here is, this is called the sharpshooter's fallacy, where you're guessing all the possible answers and then you're circling the right one at the end. Well, I'm trying to look at the movements that were successful and the movements that had an impact and the movements that actually did something. And you're trying to circle all the answers and say that you know the answer after the fact. And that's just not the case. Another one I hear quite a bit is thou shalt not judge, and this is a very common reaction. When I bring up this moral argument, the most common reaction is surprise. People are shocked that I'm saying anything bad about the religion, because atheists as a rule don't play this religious tolerance game. We don't say, oh, whatever you want to believe is just fine with me. We don't play this game. So and this game has really become not pointing out my moral screw up if I don't point out yours. So it's a kind of collusion among thugs, as far as I'm concerned, this religious tolerance. So Christians, so the Catholics don't, or the Protestants don't point out the systematic pedophilia within the Catholic Church, and the Catholics don't point out the rapture snuff porn that's being sold and how awful that is. Or the faith healers, people operating the faith healing scam don't point out problems with the prosperity gospel scam and these sorts of things. So all of these guys are working scams in various ways, and they're just agreed not to point out the scam and not to make a fuss of it. So this evolved out of the Holy Wars, where nobody could agree on what God meant or anything, and they just decided, oh, well, we can all get a piece of the pie here. So this is an agreement among thugs, and it guarantees harm, and therefore the religion is inherently immoral as far as I'm concerned. And I've even, participated in a debate recently where I got tired of all the stupid arguments that this person was bringing up, and I finally said, well, bring out your best argument. I'll make you a bet. If I can tell you that it's got a logical fallacy or a lie or emotional manipulation in it, I'll discount it. And if it doesn't have those things and it convinces me, then I will pony up. I'll be an advocate for your religion. So that was the bet. I actually put my reputation on the line. And this person wanted to change the bet. And what was interesting is they wanted to change the bet so that I never said anything bad about a believer. And that just freaked me out, because it was just this very sort of religious tolerance thing. It's like, even if they're killing babies, I would, under this bet, not be able to say anything bad about them. And that just speaks to the heart of this whole "thou shalt not judge" and this collusion as part of this religious tolerance thing. And of course, I didn't take the modified bet. Another thing that they bring up is an ad hominem thing. Well, if I bring up, the fact that Christians were so involved in all these things, they will say, well, you're not nice, or you're not a nice person, and I'm going to discount what you say because of that. Well, bullshit on that. It doesn't matter whether I'm nice or not. It matters whether we arrive at the right answer, or whether we're doing the right thing morally. These are the things that matter. So none of these supposed arguments explain the systematic moral failure of Christianity, and again, you can apply these to Judaism and Islam. So I invite people to call in and tell me why Christianity is such a crappy religion as far as its history. Call and tell me why I'm wrong. I would like to learn. Okay?
All right.
All right. That's my rant for today.
Take some calls and actually, there we go. There's that camera issue. We've got Dave in Washington, D.C. How are you?
Hey. So I'm not going to try to defend Christianity here. That's not my mindset here. But what I'm worried about is that I've heard you defend atheism before, that the mindset of atheism won't lead to violence. And I'm worried that if someone has it in their mind that religion is so destructive that they can take it upon themselves to silence it. By means outside the law.
Sure. You should always be worried about people who have thoughts like that. The thing is that's not anything that you can derive from atheism. It's something that you have to add something to atheism to in order to get there.
So, for example, in Russia, from the revolution to about World War II, you're saying that the mindset there was more focused on Lenin's ideology, as opposed to just a rejection of the church's authority.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
right,
but
because
even
the
if
church
it was
a threat to that.
But even if it was rejection of the church's authority, you still cannot draw a causal line from atheism to the mandatory elimination and criminalization of religion. You can't get there. There has to be, we take actions based on something we do believe. And atheism is a single position on a single issue. It doesn't have any tenets or dogma or edicts or anything else. And therefore, you cannot get from I'm an atheist to I'm going to outlaw religion without adding something else in there. There's some other element in there that the individual or organization must adhere to in order to get from A to B. And that's not true.
And persecuting the religious, it doesn't work, right? Christians and other religions, they're in the martyr business, and they know how to make use of martyrs, and they know how to make use of, play up persecution. And so, if you try to do that, it's going to backfire. So, the only sane way to proceed here is to argue against it, to use your free speech rights, which is exactly what we're doing. So that's why we're here, or a big part of why I'm here anyway.
Okay.
I cut you off, man.
It's all right. I just, that's kind of secondary to the issue. The issue, his concern is, is it possible to get from a strong disbelief or a strong opposition to religion to the sort of, evil, quote unquote, atheist regimes? And yes, it is. But You have to add in other things, and it's those other things that are objectionable. That's not the case when this is one of the reasons why you cannot draw a parallel between, for example, the Stalinist regimes, et cetera, to the harm that Don was pointing out that was done on behalf of Christianity. Because in the specific case of Christianity, you have this book that includes a lot of things about thou shalts and thou shalt nots and specific instructions. And it's really easy to draw a line from thou shalt not suffer a witch to live to burning witches. It's impossible to draw a line from I don't believe in a God to therefore I think I should kill those who do.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye.
As a reminder, we're live and we're taking live calls. There's a couple people on hold we'll get to in just a second. It's January 31st, 2010. After the show's over, we'll get together for dinner and go to Threadgill's at 301 West Riverside Drive. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person's welcome to join us. If you don't get through on the phones today, you can always email tv@atheist-community.org or stop by the website, www.atheist-community.org, for more information about the ACA and what's going on. So we got Forrest in Springfield.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Very well. I want to say a couple of things I hope I can touch on, but one I want to say that a lot of people put great appreciation into our troops and things, which I do as well. But, you know, you and Don and everyone who works there are also working hard, you know, for our freedoms and fighting, and you do so without pay. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that those people who use our democracy to promote our freedoms really deserve accolades, too. So I just want to put that out there.
Well, thanks.
The other thing is Christians don't know their Bible, and I really wish they'd read it. And it's frustrating when they brainwash all these children to just come up and quote 2 or 3 verses, which is about all they know, when they don't even read the verses in Genesis where it talks about all these horrid things that people do. When you have Hosea 13:16, which talks about slicing pregnant women open, killing them and their babies. I mean, that's one of the most gruesome, as well as the Psalms where it says, happy is he who dasheth the little ones against the rocks. And there's several other verses where they smash babies' heads. And it's the first thing I always bring up to those people who are so haughty and claim to be anti-abortion. But the other points I wanted to make had to do with one of the arguments that our nation was founded as a Christian nation, our forefathers. And Dan, you had brought that up, or Don, you had brought that up about the people saying this is a Judeo-Christian nation. Well, they wouldn't have said that, you know, even 50 years ago. They would have claimed it just as a Christian nation.
Right.
But
even that claim is highly suspect, right?
It is, and
It's not suspect. It's false.
It's false. And when they understand, if they would just read a little bit of history, if they would just read and educate themselves as to during our revolution when you had Thomas Paine, who was a deist and didn't believe in the Christian religion at all, wrote a book of it called Age of Reason. And he's the one that they learned in school about his common sense, which he sold 500,000 copies, which wound up in about 50% of all the households in the U.S. 20% of the population had access to this book, and or had purchased the book. But you go before that, and you get to the Salem witch trials, and you go before that, and you get to Plymouth Plantation and the Puritans, which we recognize as 2 separate groups. These were groups who came here in the early 1600s. They weren't alone. There were 400 ships every summer out in the oceans off the Atlantic coast fishing. Columbus discovered America in 1492. There were all kinds of countries coming over to grasp what land they could. And these 2 particular groups that most Christians refer to, the Puritans and the Pilgrims, came over to set up some utopian society. But within 2 generations, it fell apart, because they had to count on modern changes and modern inventions. And you had London, and you had merchants that set up their shops all along the coastal towns. And then the people who were the Puritans and the Pilgrims They knew that they needed to have glass for their houses and all the other conveniences that came along. And we do not have pilgrims. We do not have Puritans today. The reason is because those utopian societies didn't work. And they weren't here to set up a country. They were here just to set up their own utopian country. I mean, their own little compound. They were still under the rule of the king. Those who wanted to set up a separate country wound up being the merchants, the ones who went to taverns and drank and sold lots of things. The Boston Tea Party were merchants. They weren't the Christians that wanted to have the little pure little church goings every single Sunday. So anyhow, I know I covered a lot.
So the history that we hear from Christianity is often distorted, right? They focus a lot on these Puritans who came over to escape religious persecution, and then we hear very little about the other people who came over and what they did, and the fact we also don't hear very much about the fact that the Puritans, were happy to persecute based on their religious beliefs, right? So they
and the pilgrims and the Puritans. Another thing that Christians, they just don't understand history. They need to look at King Philip's War. This was a major war at that time, which took more percentage of the New England European population than World War II or the Civil War. I mean, this was a huge battle because they decided that they wanted to rape all the Indians of their land. And then you get to the Salem witch trials, and this was basically religious. There are two more points I've just got to make. Mm-hmm. People before the Industrial Revolution, the pre-industrial people, they not only believed in God, they believed in magic, and they believed in witchcraft. They believed in these magic and witchcraft. Not magic that's tricks. They believed in magic that was supernatural, as much as they did believe in God. So the Christians today have a completely different view of God than the Pilgrims and the Puritans, because they also believed that the Indians practiced witchcraft and that the Indians practiced magic, and they didn't understand the natural world back then, so they had a lot more paranoia that wound up causing in 1692 a 4-year-old girl to be put in shackles and locked in a prison. 4 years old. And the ministers of that time...
Accused of witchcraft, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And the ministers of that time were... They were paid for by the public. You couldn't set up a town. This is British rule now. You couldn't set up a town unless you actually, the townspeople, got a church first. And they had to pay for that church. Everyone, didn't matter who you were, you had to pay taxes for that church, and you had to pay taxes for that minister, who was also part of the government, because he was also a bigwig in the town. Maybe he was a councilman or things of this nature, but he wielded an enormous amount of power, which led to the separation of church and state when Thomas Jefferson wrote to that church in Connecticut saying, "Don't worry, we will build a wall between these
right, and you could make the case that he was motivated by the failures of the Salem and other failures that happened in the old world.
And these people knew about Salem. It was fresh in their minds, as it was in Benjamin Franklin's. He worked for his brother in Boston, who was a printer, just 20 years after the witch trials were over. And Thomas Paine was a friend of Benjamin Franklin's, was a friend of Thomas Jefferson, and he was instrumental in writing. He wrote a mock constitution. I mean, this guy is amazing, and he's the one that wrote The Age of Reason, which totally ripped apart Christianity. And Thomas Jefferson also felt that Christianity was one of the worst, most horrible religions that there could be.
Right, and for the audience, Thomas Paine's Age of Reason, one of the main arguments was God would never use a book to communicate his thoughts to humanity, because language changes and the book can be misinterpreted. And it's a very powerful argument that I still have yet to see addressed anywhere. It's a great argument, and it's 200-year-old argument, and we're still waiting on a response.
And the real problem though isn't that people are ignorant of this, all of the points that you made that led up to this. They're ignorant of the facts that specifically pertain to the foundation of the United States. They don't know the Constitution. They don't know that it's a secular document. They don't know what's current.
They're pumping out. It's like memes. They hear things from their parents and from the pulpit.
Yeah,
and
this nation was founded on the principles of Christianity. No, it wasn't.
A lie repeated often enough serves as the truth. Right?
And they go spout out what they were taught because they're taught to do that. They're not taught to think. They're taught to use their mouth before they use their brain, which probably frustrates those other European countries that look at us more than anything, is the fact that we have these Christians over here who just decide to go spout off what they believe without thinking at all. But let me just... and one... I appreciate you letting me do this, but...
Yeah, one last thing. Go ahead.
The American Indians, back in the time when there was King Philip's War, were being... how do I say this? The settlers were trying to convince them to become their own form of Christianity. And many of the Indians saw this and resented it. They saw what it did to their own native Indians, how it turned them to a bunch of zombies instead of thinkers. And when they first started burning settlements, what they did was they would take the Bible and they would rip out the pages and they would throw them up in the air. And this is well documented that people saw their Bibles being thrown up into the air. Why were they being thrown up into the air? Because back then, 340 years ago when this was happening, the Indians themselves were fed up with the Christians pushing their...
Well, I didn't know about that. That's very interesting. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I appreciate all the time you let me talk.
Sure. Thanks, Forrest.
Take care.
Bye.
We've got Jesus in Tampa.
Hello?
Hello?
Hey, how's it going? Basically, one of the things I want to ask about, Matt, you know a lot more about the Bible than I do. But, I'm just trying to get your opinion on this, is basically, I'm a student of political science. And when you look at a lot of the teachings of Jesus, I've thought about it myself, and it seems to me that a lot of the teachings of Jesus were, at their core, very communistic. When you compare that with what the religious right supports today, it really doesn't mesh. And
yeah, the religious right is pretty capitalistic, isn't it? It's pretty pro-capitalism and free markets, right?
Well,
Where did they get that? Yeah.
And it doesn't really stop here. I mean, if you look at throughout history, you have, and around the world, you have, I forget the name of the Saudi kings, they're creating their, classical liberal, utopia out in the Middle East. And, you look at, the feudalistic systems of Europe. You look at, the Knights Templar and, creating the first international banking system. And, I've heard a lot about, specific things in the Bible that speak against compound interest and things that are, very capitalistic. And,
usury, right?
Basically, my question is, is that kind of, basically what I thought is it fairly accurate? You know what I mean? Like, were the teachings of Jesus as communistic as I tend to believe that they are?
Well, it depends on who you talk to, but I would agree.
Let me throw something in that may be controversial. I think that the motivation of a lot of the New Testament was really not to build a society. It was to sort of focus on the fact that the end of the current world was coming soon. Get prepared, be right by God, these sorts of things. And it was very short-term focus, and they weren't focused on, how to build societies and these sorts of things, because those things take a long time to do, right? And so the focus of the New Testament is completely different than that. The Old Testament, of course, is about building societies and how to do all that, because it's got a much longer term focus. But the New Testament is focused on the end of the world and the fact that Jesus is going to come back very soon, and why worry about those things? And you get this today, and why a lot of Christians are like, why worry about the environment? Jesus is going to come back and fix everything. Or or these sorts of things, or let's foment war in the Middle East so that Jesus can come back sooner, these sorts of things. So you can read a lot into the words of the New Testament to come up with various conclusions, but I think that the main theme there is a very short-term focus on when the end of the world's coming. You want to add to that, or
No, I'm good.
Okay.
And just mention one more thing.
Sure.
And this is kind of, I've been watching I just became aware of you guys, like last week. And
Okay.
I've watched a lot of your old episodes.
We have a lot of stuff on the internet.
Yeah, I've been watching all the episodes and everything. And, when it comes to, and this is, unrelated, but when it comes to irreducible complexity, one of the things that I kind of find odd about the argument of irreducible complexity is, when you think about it, the fact that we are complex, to me, in my opinion, kind of shows that we would have evolved over a long period of time. Because if you think about it, a all-powerful creator God, if he created us, we would simply be. I believe it says in the Bible we were made of mud. We would simply be. We would not be as complex as we are.
Well, depending on what stripe of Christianity you are, you might believe that the universe is 6,000 to 10,000 years old, and so you're forced into explaining how all this complexity came about so quickly, right?
I don't buy that particular point because it implies that if there was some God, that he couldn't make something that is just as complex as things are right now, and it's contradictory. There's no justification for your assumption that if God was going to create everything, he would create it less complex than what it is now. I agree that the complexity is a testament to what we know and understand about how evolution works, that you begin with simple things and they begin to build. But complexity is a kind of a misused term anyway, but to imply that if God made us out of mud, okay, if he literally put together mud, then obviously we'd just be mud. But the implication in Genesis is that he created what we see now and just happened to use these tools. So it would be wrong to imply that God would somehow not be capable of or not want to create something that was as complex as we are.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. I appreciate the show.
Sure,
All right.
thanks a lot.
Thanks for calling.
Whoops,
Bye.
I heard your bye. We've got Joanne in Orlando.
Yes, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. This is my first time listening to your show.
Welcome.
It's very good. But, I mean, as you were talking earlier about a lot of the acts that were committed due to Christianity, I mean, it's almost like you're generalizing. There are many good Christians, as well as Muslims and other faiths as well, who live their lives on a daily basis doing good acts,
There are
helping others.
a lot of well-intentioned, wonderful people who happen to be Christians. Yes, but how do you get from that to these systematic moral failures of genocides and persecution and these sorts of things?
Well, wouldn't that still kind of fall under free will? The fact that everyone can make whatever action that they want to?
Well, there's a difference, and this is something that I kind of alluded to when we had a caller talk about, could you get from atheism to, these evil acts? When you have a book that says, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live, it is fundamentally wrong to simultaneously say, I believe that the Bible is God's word and it is our instruction book, but I think the Christians who follow these particular things in the Bible aren't real Christians. And so to an outsider, there's no way to tell who's right and who's wrong. And the most important aspect of this is there doesn't seem to be any intervention from the God on behalf of any of them.
What good
to
is your
correct,
God if this is what's going on?
To either intervene to correct, to say these are the ones that are right, or to perhaps punish the ones that are committing these abuses in his name. To an outside observer, it's exactly what we'd expect if there is no God and people are simply using these claims of God in order to justify doing whatever the heck they want.
But, I mean, isn't it also true, though, I mean, in the New Testament, when Jesus dies and commits the ultimate sacrifice, a lot of these laws that were in effect during the Old Testament were bypassed; they were dropped because we learned the New Covenant.
The sacrificial laws, traditionally within Orthodox Christianity, it's the sacrificial laws that were eliminated by the sacrifice, not the moral laws. Are you implying that the Ten Commandments are null and void?
Well, no, definitely not. That carried over. I mean, but Jesus states that to follow the Ten Commandments. And
Right.
the number one, of course, is to love thy neighbor, as...
Actually, no, that's not number one. Number one is thou shalt have no other gods before me.
But no, when Jesus states that, he says to follow the Ten Commandments, and also he states a new law, which is, of course, love thy neighbor.
Okay.
But he also said that he wasn't there to change the law.
Matthew 5:18 and 19 talks about it's right at the very beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, that not a jot or tittle of the law will be changed until heaven and earth have passed away, and that anybody who breaks even the least of those commandments will be the least in heaven. Jesus' message in there in no way says, hey, we're going to toss out the Old Testament. What the fulfillment of the law traditionally was, you no longer have to sacrifice animals. God is basically, even though he enjoys the smell of burning blood, he's over that, and you don't have to keep making those sacrifices because this has been made for you. But the moral instructions don't change, and there's no indication in the New Testament that the laws pertaining to, for example, killing witches or homosexuality or slavery were changed at all. And the Bible blatantly, clearly advocates slavery, tells you who you can enslave, how much you can pay for them, and how much you can beat them. That's never trumped in the New Testament. If anything, it's made worse. In 1 Peter 2:18, there's an instruction there for slaves to obey their masters with respect, particularly if the masters are cruel. Now, this sort of soft apologetic that modern Christians seem to have of, oh, Jesus is all about love your neighbor as yourself and love one another, and we got rid of all that old stuff. It's hogwash. It's nonsense. The idea that we can just chuck aside the Old Testament, not only does it chuck away any potential claims of prophecy that support your New Testament, it chucks out the entirety of the moral law. It's pick and choose.
It's a recent invention.
Religion,
right?
and it's fine if that's what somebody wants to do. I mean, if there are good people who would say, I think the Bible's wrong about slavery and genocide and all of these other things, and I'm just going to focus on these particular passages that are attributed to Jesus because I think that they are a good way to live. That's perfectly fine, and I'll applaud them all day long for chucking out the obvious immoral stuff. But if they're going to run around and use the same label as other people, all they're doing is sowing confusion. It's not my fault that there are 1,000 different Christian denominations out there. All of them believe something different, and these 10 are engaged in attempting to sideline the rights of everybody else based on their own beliefs, and these 20 are in favor of, bombing abortion clinics, and these 3 over here are okay with gays because they've done their, it's absurd. And there's no, like I said, there's no way for an outside observer to tell, and there seems to be no intervention from the God they believe in to clarify this to anybody. And so it ends up making the entire institution look bad, which is why, I'm not thrilled with overgeneralizing because there are plenty of, good and reasonable Christians. But it's a legitimate complaint. You got to clean your own house if you don't want people to lump everybody in one bucket.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I can definitely agree with you there. But, are you saying that the world would be better without the belief of God?
Yes.
I think so, too.
I'm convinced that's the case.
What about a lot of the people in the world who actually draw hope from the fact that there is a God?
There's a study done recently that looks at the religious belief in first world nations, Europe and the United States, and some of the countries in the Americas and Australia, of course. And it correlates. It looks at the rates of religious beliefs in these countries versus various social ills like abortion rates, sexually transmitted diseases, homicide, infant mortality. teenage pregnancy, and all these things. And on all of these things, religious belief is correlated with the ill. That is, belief.
As belief increases, societal health decreases. And
Right.
while you can't draw a causal link, there's a strong correlation there. But to your specific question about drawing hope from it, I understand a lot of people do. And it seems to be, especially if you're doing it, a good thing. But there's an old quote that and there's a lot of claims about Christians being happier than other people. And there's a quote that Russell referenced yesterday, which is the fact that a believer is happier than a non-believer is no more to the point than that a drunk is happier than someone who's sober. And you can draw hope from all kinds of things. I understand you can control behavior with a lie. You can make somebody feel good with a lie. You can ease anguish and fear and mourning with a lie. It happens all the time. It doesn't change the fact that it's a lie. And it's my personal view. I would prefer the truth. I would also, by and large, prefer a world that prefers the truth. I would not make any attempt.
But to kind of quote a few good men, some people can't handle the truth. Maybe.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that. And we talked about this.
Some people might need to grow up.
We talked about we talked about this yesterday. This idea that there are some people who just need it. It may be the case that.
I mean, not to get too personal, but like an example. I mean, my father being, a veteran of many wars and retired. I mean, at one point, really just wanted to put a bullet in his head. But it was because of his faith in God that he would get through it, and that God was with him that moved him to the next level.
And I understand that. My thing is that when people say that people need religion, that they couldn't cope without it, etc. The reason I think this is
some people.
Sure. It's the huge excuse that there are some people who need this. I think that is a fundamental lie. And the truth is that in much the same way that I can't build a car engine because I haven't been taught how to do it, so I need to rely on my mechanic, that's the same argument that people are using with respect to religion. And instead of giving them the religion that seems to do something for them, in this case it's not like a mechanic because it's not actually doing anything, it's just telling you it did something. Instead of doing that, we need to give people the tools with which they can take control of their lives, they can deal with reality, they can learn to cope.
Make better decisions.
I think that truth is always going to be preferable to fiction. I do not deny the fact that lies can be used to positive conclusions on occasion. I just don't like them.
It's just fraught with manipulation.
Anything else?
No, that's everything. It's really been fun talking with you guys, and
Thank you,
I'll
Joanne.
definitely be watching your show.
Appreciate it.
Joanne.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Bye.
Roy in Atlanta, how are you?
Oh, good. How are you guys?
Good.
In regards to your a caller previously said something about how people used to believe in magic and the Native Americans and such.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a new Jack Chick's tract where he's
Yeah.
talking about werewolves and Indians, and it's kind of funny.
Yes.
Yeah,
But,
for our readers that or our watchers that don't know about Jack Chick, he's a kind of a crackpot publisher slash religious nut who publishes these little religious tracts, and they're called Chick tracts, and they're over the top a lot of the times, and they're fun to laugh at because they're a hoot. They make all sorts of crazy claims and these sorts of things, and so you collect these things, or you've seen a bunch of them, or what?
No, I've seen a couple, and I've read through most of them online. He puts them up online.
Mm-hmm.
But
there's some good parodies out there too.
Oh yeah.
As if it needs parody.
I don't really have much to add, but there is a new documentary, or not, it's like a couple years old, called God's Cartoonist, the comic crusade of Jack T. Chick.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And you can just Google it, and it's like an hour or 20 minutes.
It's a documentary?
Yeah, it talks to people who have collected them over the years, and the Reverend Yvonne Stang from the Church of the Subgenius.
Okay.
It's a cool.
Yeah, that's fun stuff too. All right. Well, thanks.
Cool.
No
Thanks a
problem.
lot,
for
Ray.
calling.
All right, bye.
Bye. We have John from Thunder Bay. Are you there, John?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Matt.
Yeah.
Actually, this is for you. Curious, what
Guys,
is
change the camera.
Your phone's kind of breaking up. It's hard to hear. So.
oh, my phone's breaking? Anyways, I was wondering, what is the definition of the word?
We didn't hear it. Sorry. Say it again.
Are you
What
on a
is-
cell phone?
No, I'm on a regular landline.
This is weird.
Well, try to get out your question again, and we might take it so that you're off the air because you're breaking up so much that we can only hear bits and pieces of what you're saying.
That's strange.
So try it again, please.
What your definition of evil?
Evil.
Okay.
Okay.
Actions taken that conflict with my moral values.
I don't like that.
Okay. Cool. Well, since we can't talk to him, you and I can discuss
okay,
it. Why
okay.
don't you like it?
Well, I think that when people bring up the word evil, they want to sort of associate this thing. They want to anthropomorphize this thing that's out there, away from humans, that has two horns and runs around and makes you do things or whatever. Like the devil or whatever, and in a sense, the word has become so meaningless because of this sort of connotation. I like to focus instead on harm, that all humans have the potential to harm other humans.
But hang on.
And
He asked what my definition of evil was.
Well,
I gave
okay,
it, and you
okay,
objected.
okay.
And now you're going
I
to
don't-
harm. Hang on. You're going to harm. Is all harm evil? Would harm fit evil? I mean, I've burnt my hand, but that doesn't make it evil. That's harm.
I would say it's the propensity that humans have to do harm to one another. Is the equivalent of this supernatural thing to evil, but you
I
don't
don't
need
know
to
about
use
this
any
supernatural thing of evil.
any concept, any supernatural concept to explain it.
And I didn't.
You
So
didn't.
What about my definition?
Well,
are
your
you objecting
definition
to?
is whatever's in your head, and it's like, well, that doesn't help me. It's not useful. It's not
That's
practical.
not my problem.
I can't do anything with it.
Actions taken that conflict with my moral values.
Yeah, but that's subjective, and that's
Exactly.
right. So so that's why I don't like it.
But that is a problem with the term and the application. That's not a problem with the definition.
All right. Well, I just don't think anybody's going to be satisfied with that.
I wasn't expecting anybody to be satisfied with it.
Yeah.
That was the point. The actual word is useless.
This we agree on.
This construct. We evaluate things with respect to what our moral values are. Now, we share a ton of those. We have, by and large, most sane, rational people share a lot of the same values, and therefore we would have the same assessments. The reason I put my moral values in there is because, as I've said about 1,000 times, ultimately I am the arbiter of what I find morally good and morally evil, what I find morally correct. It's all judged with respect to me. That doesn't mean that I'm some autonomous, dogmatic, godlike being who's going to dictate what's right and wrong for everybody else. It happens that my moral values are the same or similar to most people on most things, and it's because we're similar creatures in similar circumstances.
We're made from the same stuff.
We have the same goals and desires. Granted, there's always exceptions. So when somebody says to me, "What's your definition of evil?" It's really simple. It is actions taken that conflict with my moral values. That doesn't mean that the word is useful, or that it gives somebody else any clear understanding of what they would think is evil. Because I don't. That wasn't the question. There's a broader
another
discussion.
thing that comes up with this evil is it tries to separate evil from humanity, and the fact is that if you have power, you have the potential to do harm to others. So you have the potential to do evil things, and we have to be able to not say it's something out there. We have to admit that it's something that could be in here. It's something that that I could potentially do harm to someone, and I have to be responsible not to let that happen. And it's up to me to do that.
I completely agree.
So
and
that's another thing that
I like the aspect of relating it to harm done by humans against others. I like that. But the ultimate, the reason why I went this way is because you're making a moral assessment. You're evaluating something to determine where it fits on the spectrum, and therefore you must be evaluating it with respect to your thing. It would be, we would be in agreement then. We both have this same value, that is, people taking actions intentionally to harm others. That's a value that we would hold, and when comparing actions to that, we would evaluate them as evil.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But putting the label on it doesn't help very much.
The label is
almost useless.
Yeah, especially because of the
supernatural connotations and all that. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. So hopefully we answered the guy's question.
But Jason in Denver, how are you?
Hey guys, I'm doing great. I've been listening to your guys' show not very long, and I just want to thank you so much for what you're doing.
Oh, great. I think you're going to ask a question that's directly related to what we just talked about.
Well, it's ironic because I haven't been able to catch the show until just a few seconds ago when I called in. So, but I did want to kind of start off by just saying that I'm kind of in a transitional stage, and I am.
There are no transitional stages. Oh, sorry.
Well, I've been a Christian my whole life, and I am just totally fed up with what I see in religion. So,
good
anyway,
for you.
So
you should be.
Appreciate what you guys are doing. But here's the question. Now, from what I've been kind of coming to myself is that our survival instincts as humanity, as humans, have kind of brought us to our moral, the place we are morally, right? We have developed our morality based on, our survival of our species.
Well, our evolution and the fact that we're a cooperative society or cooperative species not only helped us achieve all the great things we have in our communication and language and technology, but it also gave us a lot of moral background as well, that we have the brains to empathize with people, and we can understand the suffering of others and try to reduce that harm and that sort of thing. And those are some of the things that play into the morality that we have. Yes.
Right. Right. Now, my question is when you see extreme evil, like, for instance, Hitler or Pol Pot, people like that, it's like that obviously has something, it's something different. It's like that kind of evil, you don't even see that in nature.
Well, there are people who have developmental issues or issues from their growing up where their empathy has been sabotaged, and in many cases where they're sociopaths, you find that these people have had their empathy sabotaged either organically through some sort of deformation in their brain or whatever, or through some sort of childhood trauma where they had it beaten out of them. So I won't say that that's the pat explanation in all cases, but that's certainly one thing that can lead to this sociopathology. And I don't know in Hitler's case or Pol Pot's case whether those were the case, but that certainly is true of a lot of people who are in jail, for really heinous crimes.
Right, and it seems to be unique to our species almost, that evil.
Well, we know more about our species, so I don't know if I'd make that generalization because when you see an animal that has been abused its whole life, it's not a normal animal, right? Like a dog or something, right?
That's true.
But we have, in human society, we have to be pretty highly functioning in order to participate properly. A lot of stuff has to fall into place for it to work, and so I think, are more aware of the people for whom that doesn't happen, and that there's some sort of incomplete development.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I had one other quick question that has to do with my main hang-up with atheism, and I need a little clarity from you guys, because religion itself is it's very deprived, and I totally agree with you guys that from the fundamental perspective, it's very destructive. But when I look at atheism and I look at natural selection, it seems to me that based on natural selection, that we have a causal, I'll use the word causal, reason for mass murder of like people with handicaps or people who are inferior. Why doesn't atheism, at its fundamental state, not based on what just moderates believe, but at its fundamental state, why doesn't natural selection demand that we stand for like handicaps and
there's this argument that you hear sometimes that I think you're getting on, and that is, well, if you believe in evolution, then you want to make sure the most fittest survive, and that therefore this leads you down a path towards eliminating the undesirables from society, right? This is the sort of thing you're saying? Right. Well, the problem with that is there's a confusion here. No one's advocating this. The confusion is between is and ought, right? So evolution is about how the process happens, how it works. There's survival of the fittest. By the way, humans are fit because we collaborate, we work together, and we build societies. That's why we're fit. It's not because we're good at killing. So there's confusion between is and ought. So evolution is about what is and how we got there, and there's another question entirely of what ought we do. Given where we are, what ought we do going forward? What policies do we put in place? And no one's arguing for this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So those are two very different things.
The other thing is that atheism isn't in any way tied to evolution. There are plenty of theists who accept evolution as well. And yeah, Don's right. Natural selection doesn't tell you anything at all about what one should do. And by the way, this idea of survival of the fittest that gets played up in these anti-evolution arguments that, well, we should, kill the Down syndrome kids or the wheelchair bound is nonsense. And that's what that is doing, is that is artificial selection where someone else is determining what their criteria for fitness is and making pronouncements about what benefit somebody else is to society. And while that happens all the time, and it may be a fairly normal thing to do, it's not natural selection working at all.
Okay.
Good point.
Okay, well that helps out a lot. One note I just wanted to pass on to you guys, just coming from the inside perspective of Christianity, which I'm kind of getting out of, but you guys have mentioned a lot about how myths of the past, how they all kind of are similar, and like the flood, how there's different versions of it throughout different cultures, how the originality.
There are a lot of themes, and maybe part of that is because we have a lot of common fears. Right? The flood myth, I think, is about the fear of what happens if it doesn't ever stop raining.
Right.
We don't know where this rain stuff's coming from, what's turning it on and off, and what happens if it doesn't get turned off. Who's gonna pull the plug in the bathtub and drain it all out? But go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, well, I just wanted to encourage you guys when you're in this debate that what I hear from Christianity is they almost use this as a plug for themselves, because they say, well, of course it's all going to correspond. All the myths are going to correspond with each other because they all have a common root.
Yeah.
Right.
And likewise, they've argued that Satan planted earlier messiahs on the planet in order to sow confusion for when the real one would show up.
Right, yeah. So yeah, because they'll say, like, there's different cultures with different ideas of what the flood was like because they all experienced it. And so...
Yeah, pretty much any rationalization you can imagine, you're going to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of amusing, actually. See what they'll come up with next.
But thank you guys so much for what you're doing, and you're really helping to destroy my faith. So.
Okay.
Great. Glad to hear it. Thanks, Jason.
All right.
I'm sure that all the people who think I'm working for the devil have just Make a note for this particular episode. Somebody called in to say that we're destroying.
What is that title they gave you?
His apostate decadency, the arch atheist of Austin.
He's living it up to it.
I'm a bad mofo.
Okay.
All right, we've got Mike in Wild Forage. Hello, Mike.
Hello?
Yeah, you're on.
I just simply wanted to ask what you guys' take was, like, through death, what do you think happens?
You die.
That's
And
it.
you don't think anything happens with your energy or something like that?
It
'Cause
dissipates.
I don't believe in God or anything like that. I think that's ridiculous, but I just think your energy might go somewhere. I just don't know no one really knows.
All of your parts go somewhere.
Right, you start to decay, you're warm, you start to cool off, the energy that kept you warm is now dissipating out, and you start to decompose, and
You become fertilizer.
Yeah. You become fertilizer.
But it's not you. There's no indication that anything that makes me survives my death. The individual components do. The atoms will go on to become parts of cars and flowers and whatever else in however much time, and the energy that's currently making my body work will dissipate along with that. But
So
what makes me is my brain, and we
when that
already
stops
know.
working, that's all over.
While we don't really ever have to face this dilemma very often, there are extreme medical circumstances where somebody's brain essentially gets reset. We're talking a complete loss of memories and a complete change in personality. And from a legal standpoint, we consider them the same person. From a more philosophical standpoint, I'd say that they're not the same person. That what makes me are my likes, my dislikes, my preferences, my thoughts, my memories, my feelings. And if I suffer some kind of change to my nature, whether it's a massive damage to my brain or death, to which those things that make me are substantially changed or no longer existent, then I'm done. That's it.
Yeah.
The old mask gone. So as a corollary to all this, we believe that we have a very short time on this planet, and we have to make good use of it. And
definitely.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
All right, great. Thanks, Mike.
All right, well,
Appreciate it.
thanks a lot for your time.
Sure, Mike.
We got Justin in, is it Towson or Tosin?
It's Towson.
Towson, how are you, Justin?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Pretty well.
All right. I actually had two questions. The first question is, I know that the Earth, according to science, is approximately 0.5 billion years old, maybe.
You're fading in and out, so if you can kind of get to your point quickly, please
If you've
do.
are you watching the stream?
Point this: us as scientists, the scientists of the world, them not knowing that there's.
Justin, hang on.
No.
Justin,
Yes, sir.
there's something wrong with the phone. Have you got the stream on?
Sorry.
You're cutting in and out, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on because we can't understand a thing you're asking.
Is that better?
Well, we'll try. Go ahead. Start again.
Okay. What? The scientists. Understand.
It's not any better, Justin. I'm sorry. You sound like this. Then and the science and so we can't do that. So
We try one more time. I'm sorry. One more time. Hello.
yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Scientists of today, I'm not knowing everything that there is to know about science yet, even though that they're working towards that. Who's to say that there is no God? Now, let me get you straight. I am on the fence with this topic. I'm facing, I was born, showed me some things that have made me doubt my faith. But on the other hand, who's to say that there is not, if we have not proved all the science?
Okay. So if the question is who can say with absolute certainty that there is no God, the answer is no one, and it doesn't matter a bit because that's not where the burden of proof is. If the question is who can say that there is no God based on a preponderance of evidence, if we're talking about, for example, strong atheism, I can.
Okay.
It's not a position that I often present or often try to defend because I don't have any need to. What the limit is, I do not believe a God exists, and that's as far as we have to go. Some people, like myself, take it a step further and would also believe that no gods exist. This isn't a position that I would assert with absolute certainty. I don't claim that it's proved. Mine is an entirely pragmatic argument that comes down to as I see it right now, there's two possibilities. Either there is a God or there isn't. If there isn't, okay, then I'm right. But if there is, what can we say? Well, evidently we don't know anything about this God. It doesn't intervene. It doesn't show us anything about itself. All the claims about gods are unsubstantiated. There's no confirmation of miracles or anything else. There's no more evidence for this God thing than there are for fairies or leprechauns. And so in much the same way that I feel justified in saying there are no leprechauns, even though I don't assert that to absolute certainty either, I feel justified in saying that there are no gods. And the thing is what most people mean by a God is the sort of thing that you would actually expect it to at least intervene to demonstrate its existence. I mean, we look at the Christian God, the Judeo-Christian God, and you're talking about somebody who for many years performed obvious miracles and demonstrations of power, pillars of cloud and lights and walking on water and raising the dead and talk to people. And now, all of a sudden, when we get to the point where we can actually begin to investigate these claims, they kind of go away. And so, from my standpoint, I believe that there are no gods. But the only thing that I need defend, or need present, I guess, is that I do not believe that any claim for God has been justified by sufficient evidence for belief.
And we've looked at a lot of them.
Okay, so one last thing. Now, as far as belief goes, you believe there's no God. I am on the fence with the subject. Now, who's then doesn't go into, and on atheist belief, like, according like Santa Claus. Santa Claus is mommy.
Hey, Justin, your phone's breaking up again. Do me a favor. Email tv@atheist-community.org and put like AETV or NPR in there.
Sure.
And just put my name, and I'll be happy to talk to you offline since you got through on the phone. But the guys even here in the studio, they can't hear what you're saying.
Everybody in the audience is cringing because they can't make it out. So sorry.
I'd love to address the question, so email. And that's as a reminder to everybody else, if you didn't get through or couldn't get through or you had phone problems, email tv@atheist-community.org. Put AETV or NPR for Nonprofits Radio in the subject line. That'll make it through the spam filters. And while we don't answer all of them, we do answer a great deal of them. And we'll do what we can to answer yours.
You're the man answering emails, man. Whew.
Yeah, well, I got to do something.
Okay. Keeps you sharp, that's for sure.
We got Ryan in Milwaukee.
Hi.
Hey, how are you, Ryan?
Good. I wanted to discuss something about a couple callers ago when we were talking about natural selection and morality.
Yeah.
And basically, I don't think natural selection really applies much to our species anymore. It's basically natural selection means that our genetics or our genes play a role in our fitness, but in our society, it's more like the country that we're born in really plays more of a, or just luck, or having good parents, or something like that.
It's a complex topic. It turns out that if you read like Scientific American or some of the sort of popular science literature, you find out that in the last maybe 5,000 years, there's been a lot of movement as far as evolution having to do with our brains, and that's still undergoing a lot of rapid change. So you might think that we've kind of controlling our evolution, or we've maxed out some way or the other, but in reality, it's still going on. But I think it's just going on in an environment where it's a much more complex environment. It's a rapidly changing environment, and I think we're given the sort of leg up because we have so much intelligence. So it becomes a little harder to sort out all those issues, but it's still going on, and we're going to be very different in another 10,000 years than we are now.
Yeah, there's the claims that we're no longer subject to natural selection.
Oh, I didn't mean that. I meant there are other factors that probably play a bigger role than natural selection.
Well,
but yeah,
how is it?
There are a lot of.
How is it that you managed to exclude those other factors from natural selection? Who are you to say what factors are included in natural selection? It's not just nature. It's not just the weather or whether we got isolated. It's about which genes have the advantage in their reproduction, and maybe one of those advantage is, you talk about it. It's about what family you're born to. Well, that's true for everybody anywhere. The fact that we have this different perspective about society, that we have a wealth-driven culture that may ensure that some people's offspring are more likely to survive than somebody else's, I don't necessarily think that should be excluded from natural selection, because the building blocks that constructed that society are part of our genes.
Yeah, they're not directly part of our genes. Basically, Thunderfoot has a new video about this on his webpage, and he's basically showing that we've kind of, I don't know, I mean, I guess watch the video, that's better than I could describe it, but our knowledge that we've accumulated really takes precedence over our genomes right now.
Yeah, there's this argument that there's this notion of memes out there, this cultural evolution, and that this is another driving force, and you can actually make the argument, if you want, that this is taking us in another direction. I mean, we're all being programmed to sit in front of the TV or in front of the computer playing with memes and creating the internet to make these memes run around. Yeah, you can make this sort of argument, but ultimately it plays into the environment in which the genes function, and there is still a notion of selection going on that is, some people are going to have more children than other people, and these things are the basis of natural selection.
I'm gonna try and get to one more call before we're done. So thanks a lot for calling.
Yeah, thanks.
We got James in Austin.
Yes. Hey, guys.
Hey, we're almost out of time, so if you can make it quick, that'd be great.
Yeah, real quick. Just wanted to point out, it's actually a question. Is it then evil, even though it is intentional harm to another human being, if I punch someone who is attacking another human without provocation?
No, and that's why my definition was different from Don's, to avoid that.
See, Matt's so much smarter than I am.
That's why you define things, so that you can avoid that, because then it promotes discussion on other stuff. Thanks a lot to everybody for tuning in. There's the crew who, if they have a camera, I guess they can show themselves. We got one camera down. We'll be back again next week. Russell will be here. It'll be Super Bowl Sunday, so I'm sure everybody will be ready to talk about the Tim Tebow Focus on the Family commercial that I didn't bring up today, other than to say I think it's a crock, and I'm sure we'll talk about it after the fact. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget about dinner after the show at Threadgills. And don't forget about Jennifer Whitson's lecture on the 7th. See you then.